I will never forget the look on Patricia's face when she opened that box. Her hands were shaking as she pulled back the tissue paper, and for just a moment, I saw complete confusion cross her features, then recognition, then absolute horror. Her mouth dropped open, her face went white as snow, and she made this sound, this strangled gasp that made everyone in the room turn to look. My husband asked if she was okay, reaching for her, but she jerked away from him like he had burned her. She looked at me across that living room, past the Christmas tree with its twinkling lights, past the pile of presents, and the stockings, and all the holiday cheer. And in that moment, Patricia knew exactly what I had done. She knew I had won, and there wasn't a single thing she could do about it without destroying herself completely. But let me back up, because you need to understand how we got to that Christmas morning and why what I did was not just justified, but necessary. My name is Catherine, and I have been married to Patricia's son David for 12 years. 12 long years of being told I wasn't good enough, wasn't worthy, wasn't the woman Patricia had envisioned for her precious boy. From the moment David brought me home to meet his family, Patricia made it clear that I was a disappointment. I wasn't from the right background. My family didn't have money or social standing. I worked as a nurse, which Patricia found common. I wasn't sophisticated enough, pretty enough, accomplished enough. Nothing I did was ever right in Patricia's eyes, and she made sure I knew it every single chance she got. The criticism was constant and relentless. If I cooked dinner, it wasn't seasoned properly. If I wore a dress, it wasn't appropriate for the occasion. If I spoke up in conversation, I was being too forward. If I stayed quiet, I was being rude and antisocial. Patricia had mastered the art of the passive-aggressive comment, the backhanded compliment, the criticism disguised as concern. She would say things like, "Oh, Catherine, are you really wearing that? I'm sure you look lovely to some people." Or, "David, darling, are you sure Catherine knows how to handle the Christmas hosting? It's such an important tradition, and we wouldn't want anything to go wrong." Every family gathering was an exercise in enduring Patricia's subtle and not so subtle put-downs, and every time I tried to talk to David about it, he would tell me I was being too sensitive, that his mother meant well, that this was just how she was, and I needed to try harder to get along with her. For years I tried. I really did. I bent over backward to please Patricia, to earn her approval, to be the daughter-in-law she wanted. I studied recipes from her generation, learned to make pot roast and apple pie from scratch. I dressed more conservatively. I kept my opinions to myself at family dinners. I volunteered to help with every holiday, every birthday, every family event, hoping that if I just worked hard enough, she would finally accept me. But nothing I did made any difference. If anything, Patricia seemed to enjoy my efforts to please her because it gave her more power over me. The more I tried, the more she criticized. The harder I worked, the more she found fault. And through it all, David remained oblivious or unwilling to see what his mother was really doing. The worst part wasn't even the criticism itself. It was the way Patricia would act so sweet and loving in front of David, in front of the rest of the family, in front of friends and neighbors. To the outside world, Patricia was a wonderful woman, a devoted mother, a pillar of the community. She was active in her church. She volunteered at charity events. She was always the first to bring a casserole when someone was sick or grieving. Everyone loved Patricia. Everyone thought she was kind and generous and caring, and I was the only one who saw the mask slip, who saw the coldness in her eyes when no one else was looking, who heard the edge in her voice when she said my name. I felt like I was going crazy, like I was imagining things. Because how could this woman who everyone adored be so cruel to me? But I wasn't imagining it. It was real, and it was destroying me slowly, piece by piece. Things came to a head about 2 years ago, during what should have been one of the happiest times of my life. David and I had been trying to have a baby for several years, and I had finally gotten pregnant. We were overjoyed. We told the family at a Sunday dinner, expecting celebration and excitement. David's father was thrilled, genuinely happy to become a grandfather. But Patricia's reaction was strange. She smiled. She said all the right things, but there was something off about it, something forced. Over the next few weeks, as I dealt with morning sickness and fatigue, Patricia started making comments about my ability to handle motherhood. She questioned whether I would be able to balance work and family. She suggested that perhaps I should consider staying home, that David shouldn't have to support us alone, that children needed stability and routine that I might not be able to provide. The comments got worse as my pregnancy progressed, more pointed, more hurtful. And then, when I was 6 months along, I lost the baby. It was devastating. The worst pain I've ever experienced, physical and emotional. I was heartbroken, traumatized, grieving. David was a wreck. We held each other and cried and tried to make sense of something that made no sense. My own family rallied around me, supporting us through the darkest time of our lives. And Patricia came to the hospital, said how sorry she was, how tragic it all was. And then, 3 days later, when I was home trying to recover, she showed up at my door with a casserole and a speech about how this was probably for the best, that God has a plan, that maybe this was a sign that I wasn't ready to be a mother, that perhaps David and I should reconsider having children at all, given my health issues and our financial situation. She said all of this standing in my living room, looking at me with those cold eyes. And I realized in that moment that Patricia was glad I had lost the baby. She was actually glad, because it meant I had failed at something else, something fundamental, and it gave her more ammunition to prove I wasn't good enough for her son. I asked her to leave. I told her to get out of my house and not come back. She acted shocked, wounded, telling me that grief was making me irrational, that she was only trying to help. But I stood my ground. I wanted her gone. After she left, I told David what she had said, how cruel she had been. And do you know what David did? He defended her. He said I was overreacting, that his mother was just trying to be supportive in her own way, that I was displacing my grief onto her because I needed someone to blame. He actually made me apologize to Patricia a week later, forced me to call her and say I was sorry for kicking her out, for being rude to her. I did it because I was exhausted, because I was still grieving, because I didn't have the strength to fight both David and Patricia at the same time. But something inside me broke that day. Something fundamental shifted in how I saw my marriage and my place in this family. Over the next year and a half, I went through the motions. I attended family dinners and smiled and nodded and played the part of the dutiful daughter-in-law. But inside, I was watching. I was paying attention in a way I never had before. I started to see patterns, to notice things I had missed when I was too busy trying to please everyone. I noticed that Patricia treated David's younger brother, Mark, and his wife, Julie, very differently than she treated us. Julie could do no wrong in Patricia's eyes. Everything Julie said was brilliant. Everything she wore was stylish. Every meal she cooked was perfection. And I realized it wasn't about me personally. It was about control. Patricia adored Julie because Julie came from money, because Julie's family had social connections. Patricia valued because Julie made Patricia look good by association. I was unacceptable, not because of who I was as a person, but because I didn't enhance Patricia's image or give her status. I also started to notice other things about Patricia, things that didn't quite add up. She presented this image of the perfect wife, the devoted partner to David's father, Robert, for 35 years. She talked constantly about the importance of marriage, of commitment, of family values. She made a show of being a pillar of their church, attending every Sunday, serving on committees, organizing charity drives. But there were little inconsistencies, little moments that made me wonder. Phone calls she would take in another room, unexplained absences, a strange tension between her and Robert that she covered with public displays of affection that felt performative. And one day, purely by accident, I stumbled onto something that explained everything. I had stopped by Patricia and Robert's house to drop off some paperwork David had asked me to deliver. No one answered the door, but I knew they were home because both cars were in the driveway. I used the spare key they kept hidden under a flower pot, letting myself in and calling out to announce my presence. Still no answer. I walked through the house looking for them, and that's when I heard voices coming from Robert's study. The door was slightly ajar, and I was about to knock when I heard Patricia's voice, sharp and angry, in a way I had never heard before. She was arguing with Robert about money, about how much he was spending, about bills she didn't want to pay. And then she said something that made me freeze in place. She said, "Dee, if you think I'm paying for your mistakes after everything I've already sacrificed to keep my secrets buried, you're insane." Robert responded with something I couldn't quite hear, and Patricia snapped back. "I've held this family together for 30 years, and if you threaten that, I will make sure everyone knows what you did, what we both did. Don't test me." I backed away from the door quietly, left the papers on the kitchen counter, and got out of that house as quickly as I could. My heart was pounding. My mind was racing. What secrets was Patricia talking about? What had she sacrificed? What had Robert done? I didn't know, but I knew it was significant, and I knew Patricia was hiding something big behind that perfect image she presented to the world. That conversation planted a seed in my mind, a question I couldn't let go of. Who was Patricia really, and what was she so desperate to hide? I want to be clear about something. I'm not the kind of person who goes digging into other people's private lives. I'm not vindictive or cruel by nature, but after years of abuse, after being made to feel worthless, after losing my baby and then being told it was for the best, after watching Patricia destroy my self-esteem while everyone praised her as a saint, I felt like I was owed the truth. I felt like I had the right to understand who this woman really was, this woman who had so much power over my life and my marriage. So I started looking into Patricia's past, carefully and quietly, not even telling David what I was doing. It started with simple internet searches, public records, old newspaper archives. Patricia had lived in this town her whole life, had been a prominent figure in social circles, so there was plenty of documentation. I found articles about charity events she had organized, church activities she had participated in, social gatherings she had hosted, all very respectable, very normal. But then I started looking further back, to before she married Robert, to when she was Patricia Morrison instead of Patricia Caldwell. And that's when things got interesting. Patricia had been engaged before Robert. I found an engagement announcement from 36 years ago, when she was 22, announcing her upcoming marriage to a man named James Whitmore. The announcement was in the society pages, complete with a photo of young Patricia looking radiant and happy. But there was no wedding announcement that followed. Instead, 6 months later, there was a small article about James Whitmore's sudden death in a car accident. Tragic, the article said. A promising young man cut down in his prime. Patricia was listed among the mourners. And then, less than a year after James's death, there was another announcement. Patricia Morrison was marrying Robert Caldwell in a small, intimate ceremony. Quick turnaround, I thought. But grief makes people do unpredictable things, and maybe she had needed stability after losing her fiancé. Except something about it bothered me. The timeline felt off. So I kept digging, and I found more pieces of the puzzle. James Whitmore had been wealthy, from one of the oldest families in the county. His death had triggered a significant inheritance dispute, according to some legal notices I found in archived county records. And then I found something that made everything click into place. I found a birth certificate, filed 8 months after James's death, for a baby girl named Amanda Whitmore, mother listed as Patricia Morrison, father listed as James Whitmore, a baby born after the father was already dead, born to Patricia before she married Robert. I sat at my computer staring at that birth certificate for a long time, my mind working through the implications. Patricia had been pregnant when James died. She had given birth to his child, and then she had married Robert less than 3 months after giving birth, which meant Robert was not the father of that baby. So what happened to Amanda? There was no record of a child in Patricia's life, no mention of a daughter anywhere in the family history. David had never mentioned having a half-sister. I searched for more information about Amanda Whitmore and found adoption records, sealed, but with enough information available to confirm that Amanda had been given up for adoption shortly after birth. Patricia had given away her daughter, James's daughter, and then married Robert and built a new life as if that child had never existed. But there was more. I kept digging, driven by a need to understand the full picture. I found records of a life insurance policy on James Whitmore, a substantial one, with Patricia listed as the beneficiary. She had collected a large payout after his death. I found records showing that Patricia had used that money to pay off debts, to finance her wedding to Robert, to make investments that had grown substantially over the years. And then I found something that made my blood run cold. I found an old police report filed a week after James's death, questioning the circumstances of the accident. A witness had reported that James's car had been tampered with, that the brake lines looked like they had been deliberately cut. But the investigation had been closed quickly, ruled accidental, no charges filed. The witness was never called to testify. The case was buried. I couldn't prove that Patricia had anything to do with James's death. I couldn't prove that the accident was anything other than tragic chance. But the pieces fit together in a way that was deeply disturbing. Patricia had been pregnant, engaged to a wealthy man. That man died under suspicious circumstances right before the wedding. Patricia collected his insurance money and gave up their child, then married Robert and used the money to build a comfortable life. She had literally profited from James's death, had erased the evidence of their relationship, and had built her perfect family image on the foundation of secrets and lies. And suddenly, all of Patricia's cruelty toward me made sense. She wasn't just controlling or judgmental. She was a woman who had committed terrible acts and gotten away with it, who had built her entire life on deception, and who couldn't tolerate anyone who might see through her facade. I was a threat to her because I was too observant, too independent, too likely to notice that something was wrong. She had to break me down, had to keep me in my place, because if I ever felt strong enough to challenge her, I might see what she really was. If you can't stand people who build their lives on lies and manipulation, hit that subscribe button right now. And if you think someone like Patricia deserves to have her secrets exposed, drop a comment below saying exposed. Because what I did next made sure Patricia's perfect image came crashing down. I spent weeks deciding what to do with the information I had gathered. I could have confronted Patricia directly, but that would have been pointless. She would have denied everything, would have turned it around on me somehow, would have convinced David and the rest of the family that I was crazy or vindictive. I could have told David everything, but I knew he wouldn't believe me. He had spent his entire life believing his mother was perfect, and people don't give up those beliefs easily, especially when the truth is so dark. No, if I was going to do this, I had to do it in a way that was undeniable, in a way that would force everyone to see the truth, in a way that Patricia couldn't talk her way out of. And then it hit me. Christmas was coming. The whole family would be gathered. Patricia loved Christmas, loved playing the role of the perfect matriarch, loved being the center of attention. What better time to give her a gift she would never forget? I started planning 3 months before Christmas. I hired a private investigator to fill in the gaps in my research, to confirm details, to track down people who had known Patricia 35 years ago. The investigator found Amanda, Patricia's daughter, now a grown woman living in another state, who had no idea that her birth mother was alive or who she was. Amanda had been raised by adoptive parents who loved her, had a good life, but had always wondered about her origins. The investigator also tracked down the witness who had reported the suspicious circumstances of James's car accident, an elderly man, now in his 70s, who still remembered that day and still believed something wasn't right about it. He had never been interviewed properly, had tried to tell the police what he saw, but had been dismissed. He was willing to talk now, willing to go on record. I gathered everything into a single file: birth certificates, adoption records, insurance documents, police reports, witness statements, photographs. I had the investigator verify every single piece of information, make sure it was accurate and defensible. And then I did something that some people might think was cruel, but which I believed was necessary. I created a family tree, a beautiful professional document showing Patricia's family lineage. But this family tree included Amanda, included James, included all the parts of Patricia's history that she had tried to erase. I had it printed on high-quality paper, professionally framed, with historical photos and documentation woven throughout. It looked like a loving tribute, like a thoughtful gift celebrating family heritage. But it was really a truth bomb that would destroy Patricia's carefully constructed lies. Christmas arrived. David and I drove to his parents' house that morning, as we did every year. The whole family was there, aunts and uncles and cousins, Mark and Julie, even some of Patricia's church friends. The house was decorated beautifully. The tree was massive and covered in ornaments. There was food and music and laughter. Patricia was in her element, playing the perfect hostess, wearing an elegant red dress, smiling and greeting everyone warmly. She even hugged me when we arrived, told me I looked lovely, asked how I was doing. All performance, all fake, but everyone else thought it was genuine. We exchanged pleasantries, opened presents, ate breakfast. It was all very traditional, very Norman Rockwell, exactly the kind of Christmas Patricia loved to orchestrate. Then it was time for the special gifts, the meaningful presents that people had put extra thought into. Patricia loved this part, loved being praised for her generosity, loved watching people fawn over her. She had given David and me matching cashmere scarves, expensive and tasteful, and everyone oohed and awed over them. Julie had given Patricia some fancy perfume. Mark had given his parents tickets to a show, and then Patricia turned to me expectantly, waiting to see what I had brought for her. I had been careful not to make a big deal out of my gift beforehand, had simply wrapped it beautifully and placed it under the tree with the others. I handed it to her with a smile, told her I hoped she liked it, that I had put a lot of thought into it. Patricia made a show of carefully unwrapping it, commenting on the lovely paper, building anticipation. She lifted the lid off the box and pulled back the tissue paper, expecting jewelry or a scarf or some other generic gift. Instead, she found the framed family tree. For a moment, she just stared at it, not understanding what she was looking at. I saw confusion on her face, then curiosity as she started to examine it more closely. She was reading the names, following the lines, and then I saw the exact moment it clicked. The moment she saw James Whitmore's name. The moment she saw Amanda listed as her daughter. The moment she realized what I had done. All the color drained from her face. Her hands started to shake. She looked up at me with absolute horror in her eyes, and she opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Everyone was watching now, confused by her reaction, wondering what could possibly be in that frame to cause such a response. David stood up, walked over to his mother, and gently took the frame from her trembling hands. He looked at it, his expression puzzled, and then he asked what it was. I explained in a calm, pleasant voice that it was a family tree I had researched and created, a comprehensive history of the Caldwell and Morrison families. I had discovered some fascinating information, I said, things I thought the whole family should know about. David was looking more closely at the frame now, reading the names and dates, and I saw his face change as he realized what he was seeing. He looked at his mother and asked, in a voice tight with confusion, who Amanda Whitmore was and why she was listed as Patricia's daughter. The room went completely silent. Patricia tried to speak, tried to say something, anything, to explain it away. She stammered that it was a mistake, that I had gotten bad information, that this was all nonsense. But I had prepared for this. I pulled out my phone and calmly pulled up the digital copies of all the documents I had gathered. The birth certificate with Patricia's signature, the adoption papers, the insurance policy, the police report about James's suspicious death. I offered to show them to anyone who wanted to see. David took my phone with shaking hands and started scrolling through the images, his face getting paler with each document he read. Other family members crowded around to look. Patricia was still trying to do damage control, her voice getting higher and more desperate, insisting that this was all a misunderstanding, that I was trying to cause trouble, that everyone needed to just calm down. But it was too late. The truth was out. Mark asked his mother directly if she had had a baby before marrying their father, if she had given that baby up for adoption. Robert, who had been silent until now, stood up and walked out of the room, his face like stone. He had known, I realized. He had known at least some of it, and he had helped her hide it. David was staring at his mother like he had never seen her before, asking question after question. Did she know James before his accident? Did she profit from his death? Had she really given up a child and never mentioned it in 35 years? Patricia tried to lie, tried to spin it, but there were too many people now who had seen the evidence, too many questions she couldn't answer. And then someone, I think it was one of Patricia's church friends, asked the question that broke everything wide open. She asked about the police report, about the witness who said James's car had been tampered with. She asked Patricia directly if she had anything to do with James's death. The room exploded. People were talking over each other, some defending Patricia, some demanding answers. Patricia was crying now, real tears of panic and desperation, not the manipulative tears she usually deployed to get her way. She was cornered, and she knew it. Everything she had built, every lie she had told, every secret she had buried, was being dragged into the light in front of everyone who mattered to her. David turned to me and asked why I had done this, why I would bring this up now, why I would humiliate his mother like this in front of the family. And I looked at him, at this man I had loved for 12 years, this man who had never once defended me against his mother's cruelty, and I told him the truth. I told him that his mother had made my life a living hell from the day we met, that she had torn me down systematically, that she had been glad when I lost our baby because it gave her more reason to think I was inadequate. I told him that I had tried for years to earn Patricia's approval, to be good enough, to be what she wanted, and that nothing I did was ever enough. And I told him that I had finally realized it was never about me. It was about Patricia being a liar and a manipulator who couldn't tolerate anyone who might see through her act. I had done this, I said, because Patricia needed to face consequences for once in her life, because her victims, and there were many of us, deserved to know the truth. And because I was done being treated like I was worthless by a woman who had built her entire life on deception. The fallout from that Christmas was catastrophic for Patricia. Several family members, horrified by what they had learned, cut off contact with her completely. Her church friends were shocked and distanced themselves, and word spread quickly through their social circle. Patricia's reputation, the thing she valued most in the world, was destroyed virtually overnight. Robert moved out of their house 2 weeks after Christmas and filed for separation. He gave an interview to David where he admitted that he had known about Amanda, had known about the suspicious circumstances of James's death, and had spent 35 years helping Patricia hide it because she had threatened to ruin him if he didn't. He was tired of living a lie. He wanted out. David and I separated a month later. He couldn't forgive me for exposing his mother, couldn't reconcile what I had done with the image he had of who I was supposed to be. He called me vindictive, cruel, unforgiving. He said I had destroyed his family, and you know what? He was right about one thing. I did destroy the lie his family was built on. But that lie was destroying me, so I made a choice. I chose myself. I chose truth over convenience. I chose justice over keeping the peace. And I would make that choice again in a heartbeat. The investigator I hired was able to connect me with Amanda, Patricia's daughter, and with her permission, I reached out. We met for coffee, and I told her everything I knew about her birth, about James, about the circumstances of her adoption. She cried, not because she was angry or hurt, but because she finally had answers to questions she had wondered about her whole life. She thanked me for finding her, for giving her the truth. We still talk occasionally. She has no desire to have a relationship with Patricia, but she wanted to know where she came from, and I was able to give her that. As for Patricia, she sold her house and moved to another town, trying to start over where people didn't know her history. But the internet is forever, and her story spread. Her perfect image was gone, replaced by the reality of who she was and what she had done. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she blamed me for everything, that she told anyone who would listen that I was a vindictive woman who had destroyed her life out of spite. Maybe some people believed her, but the people who mattered, the people who saw the evidence, knew the truth. I rebuilt my life after the divorce. It was hard at first, but I was surprised by how much lighter I felt without the weight of Patricia's judgment, without the constant effort to be good enough for a woman who would never accept me. I started therapy, worked through the trauma of years of emotional abuse, learned to set boundaries and stand up for myself. I dated again, eventually met someone who treats me with respect and kindness, someone whose family welcomed me with open arms. And I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to stop trying to make peace with people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Looking back on that Christmas morning, I don't regret what I did. Some people think it was too harsh, too public, too cruel. They think I should have handled it privately, should have been more compassionate, should have considered Patricia's age and her feelings. But here's the thing. Patricia never considered my feelings when she was tearing me down. She never showed me compassion when I was grieving. She never handled anything privately when she was turning my own husband against me. She played the game ruthlessly for years, and when I finally played it better than she did, when I finally beat her at her own game, she couldn't handle it. And that's not my problem. That's hers. The gift I gave Patricia that Christmas wasn't just a family tree. It was the truth. It was accountability. It was the consequences she had avoided her entire adult life. And it was the gift of my own freedom, because in exposing her, I freed myself from her power over me. She cried when she opened that gift, cried because she finally had to face what she had done. And you're right, it wasn't the way anyone expected, but it was exactly what she deserved. If you believe toxic people deserve to have their lies exposed, smash that like button. Subscribe if you think standing up to someone who made your life miserable is always worth it, and comment below what you would have done in my situation, because I want to hear your stories too. Thank you for being here, for taking the time to listen to mine. And remember, sometimes the best gift you can give yourself is the courage to tell the truth.